Welcome back to the channel. I'm Tiffany and I'm here to bring you another cosplay tutorial. And this one is continuing with our Dark Magician Girl cosplay from YuGiOh, specifically her Hattie hat. Yee! Now this hat was really fun to make. It is super lightweight and it is EVA foam covered in fabric. So it should be pretty easy for you to bring to life as well. But before we begin on how to make it, remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now let's begin. And here are all of the tools and materials that I used for making this hat. And I'll have links to everything in the description, as well as you're probably gonna want my pattern to follow along and make this. And that's also available on my website, TiffanyGordonCosplay.com. And once you get the pattern, you're going to want to print out all of the pages, tape it together, cut out each of the shapes, and we're going to lay parts A through F onto 4mm EVA foam. And then you're going to want to trace each of those parts onto that, as well as don't forget to label them. Then grab your heating tool and we're going to heat treat all of the foam so that way all of the pores will shrink and it'll make it so our glue will adhere to this foam better. After that, we're going to use a X-Acto knife and cut out each of the parts. And to get the color for this hat, I ended up using pink and blue PU coated spandex, which I got from Blue Moon Fabrics. But if you don't want to cover them in fabric and you want to do the traditional painting method, that totally is fine. Just skip all of the fabric parts and continue along with gluing and painting after. And for doing this method, you want to cut the parts of fabric out so they will be larger than the foam that you want to cover. And I typically cut my fabric so that way it is in a rectangular-like shape or however big to cover the foam and have at least an inch of space all the way around each of the parts. Reason being is if you were just to apply your glue onto the back of this fabric, the fabric is going to start to roll up on itself. So you need that extra fabric so you can either use tape to tape it down onto a surface, or my little trick is to use the Cricut cutting mats because they are sticky and you can lay the fabric out flat to apply your glue onto the back side of your fabric. As well as you're going to need to apply your glue onto the top part of your foam. And I'm using DAP's contact cement glue. And I will note that in order to attach fabric to a foam surface, you will need to apply 2 coats of contact cement glue. So that means apply your glue, wait for it to dry, and then apply a second coat of glue and wait for it to dry before attaching parts together like this. Next is covering our foam with the fabric, and I took the fabric off of our Cricut cutting mats and replaced it with our foam parts, making sure the glue is facing upward. And then I grabbed the fabric, and with the adhesive side facing towards the foam, I start from one end of the foam and using something that is flat, so I recommend either a leather burnisher or a rubber roller to push out all the bubbles starting from one side and working your way to the other. Then for parts D, E, and F, you're going to want to turn your piece upside down and trim off all of your extra fabric all the way flush to the edge of your foam. And for part C, because this is the lowest part of the hat for the pointed part, that part is going to be exposed and people will see it. So it is optional if you want to cover the bottom edge with the fabric or not. But for me, what I did was I applied the contact cement glue to the bottom edge just like we did beforehand, and then I wrapped the fabric around the back side. And this would make it so none of our foam will be visible in the end. Then we're gonna go back and grab our contact cement glue and apply our glue to all of the labeled edges. And this time you only need to do it once because we're just applying the parts from foam to foam. Then when the glue is dry, you can start connecting each of the edges together. I will note that F is the trickiest one to attach, just because it's such a small tip at the top. So work your way back and forth. You may need to apply a little bit of extra contact cement glue just to help push those edges together, but repeat this for E, D, and C. And you should have each of these little donut ring-like kind of pieces. And then we can connect each of those pieces together. And I will note that your line should be on the very back part of each of these pieces. So I started with connecting F to E, and then E to D, followed by D to C. Also has these pink detail trim parts, and for this I'm going to be using 10mm half round foam dowels, and I'm going to be covering them with the same type of fabric, the PU coated spandex, but this time in pink. And there are a lot of pieces throughout the whole entire cosplay, so I did all of this at once. But basically, I got a large piece of cardboard, put some tape on so that way all of my foam dowels would be able to stick on it, and cut really large pieces of the fabric that would cover multiple parts of the dowel rods. It just made it a lot easier rather than trying to cover each one individually. And did the same method with our contact cement glue, applying it 2 times onto all of the foam dowels, as well as 2 times onto the backside of the fabric, and once it was dry, then we could attach it. And a side note, the fabric doesn't technically attach to the foam if it just lays on top. You are actually applying pressure into the foam, and that's what's causing the connection part. So it shouldn't really stick to the foam if you lay the fabric on top. So I covered it like that, and then starting from one side of the foam dowel, I kind of used my leather burnisher, or you can use the rubber roller, and work your way from one side to the other, slowly going around all of the edges. Then proceeded with some scissors, cutting them off and then trimming them so they were flush at the bottom. Once that's done, you're going to want to mark where you're going to apply your glue onto your now top part of the blue covered hat. And I'm just using some calipers, and I measured 10mm so that way I could easily leave an indentation into the foam, but you don't need to do that. You can just use a pencil and trace where you want to apply the glue, or just freehand it. It's whatever. But basically you're using this to cover each of these seams, and that is where the pink parts are going to attach. And then apply your contact cement glue. And again, it's going to be 2 coats of glue per each of the locations. So on the back side of our pink covered trim, as well as to the spots where we're going to cover the blue part of the hat. And once it's dry, you can then start attaching them. And I started on the back part where our main seam is, wrapping the pink part all the way around, and I ended up making them so they should be a little bit longer than what you need. So you will want to go back and trim it to connect it together. Now for the hat bill, which is parts A and B. And if you didn't already do it, trace and cut it out of your 4mm EVA foam. And I will note that for A and B, where they connect on our curved line, I highly recommend sanding that at a 45-degree angle with a sanding drum in your Dremel, so that way they will connect nice and flush and come to a point. Then repeat the same process as for the hat pointed part for doing your contact cement glue 2 times on the foam and the fabric, and you can attach that together. But unlike the pointed part of the hat, we are going to be trimming it a little bit differently because the foam will be exposed when you wear the hat when you're in full cosplay. So we do want to cover our edges. So I did end up leaving about 1/2 inch of extra fabric all the way around all of our edges. And for the two edges that do connect to the other half, so A and B, I did cut those flush. Then with some more contact cement glue onto those edges where we have extra fabric, as well as to the back side of our foam. After it was dry, I then pushed the fabric over the edge so it would fully cover. And a little helpful tip is where all of the sharp edges are, where they come to a point, use your scissors and just snip it in the center, so that way it makes it easier to pull that fabric over. And for these parts, I wanted them to be fully covered in the fabric. So I ended up cutting another 2 pieces of PU coated spandex and covering them with our contact cement glue, as well as to our back side of the A and B parts that are not covered in fabric with our contact cement glue 2 times, waited for the dry, and then I could attach the parts together. And just like before, we're gonna start from one side and slowly flatten out all the bubbles, working to the other side. Then trim all of the extra fabric flush. And for the bill trim, again, we're gonna be using that 10mm half round foam dowels, but this time we have to do a little bit of attaching and making them into the correct shape. So with the help of my pattern, I'd lay the foam dowels on top of it, having a little bit of the foam go past where they would connect, and using a box cutter, I would cut it down in that line. I would do this for all of the parts, so that way I could then apply contact cement glue to those edges and attach them to make the specific shape for that part. And just like before, I covered all of this trim also in the pink fabric using the same technique. Next, I marked where all of this trim would lay and applied my contact cement glue 2 times to all of the edges, as well as to the back side of our trim, waited for it to dry, and then attached them together. And your 2 halves should look like this. Then I flipped my pieces upside down, and following the same angle that we sanded our curved part, I cut the foam with a box cutter. So this way when we connect the 2 pieces, it should connect flush. And now onto the spiral, and I'll note that I did end up 3D modeling and printing this spiral piece, and you can get my file on my website, tiffanyGordonCosplay.com, or if you don't have access to a 3D printer or just don't want to 3D print it, that is totally fine. You can still make this out of foam. I would recommend, if you are gonna do that, do it out of 10mm foam and then sand it round, and then get either an X-Acto knife and cut out that spiral, or use a soldering wand to cut out that spiral swirl in the middle, and that's totally fine as well. But for me, I ended up 3D printing it out of PVA filament, and then I did a typical cleanup job with my sanding buffs. And then I also was going to cover these parts with our pink fabric. And you will want to cut out 2 parts of fabric in a square-like shape for this piece, so 1 for the back and 1 for the top. Then apply your 2 coats of contact cement glue onto both the fabric as well as your 3D printed part. And when it's dry, you can then attach them together. And I started with the top half of our spiral. You'll lay the fabric on top, and working from the very center this time, you're gonna work your way out to remove all of the bubbles, as well as slowly working in that spiral swirl in the center. Then trim your fabric, and you're going to then apply your contact cement glue to the back side of the gem and your fabric, and repeat the same process until it is fully covered. Now for the location of where the spiral should lay on the bill of the hat, I had it where it would cover up the seam for where the 2 pieces connected on the side. And what you'll want to do is get your spiral, lay it on top, and with a pencil trace where it's going to sit. This will give you a better indication of where to remove the pink trim, and I just did this by cutting with an X-Acto knife and pulling up that part, and then that let me know also where I should apply my contact cement glue, again 2 times, waiting for it to dry, and then I could attach it together. that's left now is attaching the hat point part to the hat bill. And I highly recommend taping the two parts together first so you have a good idea of the angle that you want it to sit. But basically, after I figured that, I ended up tracing where they would touch with a pencil. So this way I knew where to apply my contact cement glue 2 times, and then I could attach it. I started in the very back, so where our line is on the back of the hat, as well as if you were to push the bill flat, where that back part would sit. So starting back there and working my way around to the sides. And basically for where it attached is I made sure it would go to the spiral part as well as to the other side where the point part was. And that's how I finished this. And that, guys, is how I made this hattie hat for Dark Magician Girl from the anime Yu-Gi-Oh! And I hope that you found this tutorial helpful for making the hat or maybe using the same technique for your next creation. And if so, let me know in the comments. I'd love to get feedback on what you thought of this tutorial, as well as what character should I bring to life next. A big thank you to all of my company sponsors here on YouTube, as well as all of my members. Specifically, and you know who you are, those legendary members who help so that way I can continue doing this as my full-time job. And I really appreciate your support. And as always, like the video and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you for our next tutorial. Much love, guys.